My name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, I married the love of my life in what everyone called the perfect wedding. David and I had been together for 4 years, planning every detail of our future with the kind of excitement that makes you believe fairy tales actually do come true. We chose Santorini for our honeymoon because David said he wanted our first week as husband and wife to be somewhere as beautiful as our love story. I thought I knew everything about the man I married. I was wrong. What I discovered in our hotel room on the 3rd night of our honeymoon didn't just shatter my perfect marriage. It revealed a truth so dark that I'm still trying to process what it means for my future. If you're watching this now, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the person sleeping next to me. Our wedding was everything we had dreamed of for 2 years of planning. The venue was a restored Victorian mansion with gardens that looked like something grandmothers altered to fit perfectly, and when from a romance novel. My dress was my David saw me walking down the aisle. I watched tears stream down his face. His vows were so heartfelt that half the guests were crying by the time he finished. We promised to be honest with each other, always, to share our deepest thoughts and fears, to build a life based on complete trust and transparency. The reception lasted until 2 in the morning, with dancing and laughter that felt like pure magic. Everyone kept telling us how perfect we were together, how obvious it was that we were soulmates. David works as a financial consultant for a prestigious firm downtown, the kind of job that requires long hours but pays well enough that we could afford the dream honeymoon we had planned. I'm a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital, which means I see families at their most vulnerable moments every single day. That job taught me to read people, to notice the small details that others might miss, to trust my instincts when something doesn't feel right. It's a skill that served me well in my profession, but I never thought I would need to use it to analyze my own husband. Our relationship had always been built on communication. We talked about everything, from our childhood fears to our wildest dreams for the future. David was the kind of man who remembered every story I told him, who would surprise me with my favorite coffee on stressful days, who never forgot an anniversary or birthday. He was thoughtful in ways that made me feel cherished, like when he would leave little notes in my lunch bag or text me photos of things that reminded him of me. We had the kind of relationship that made our friends jealous, the kind where we could have entire conversations with just a look across a crowded room. When we decided to get married, the proposal was perfect, too. He took me to the spot where we had our first date, a small cafe with outdoor seating where we had talked for hours about our dreams and ambitions. He got down on one knee right there at the same table where I had first realized I was falling in love with him. The ring was exactly what I would have chosen myself, a simple solitaire that caught the light beautifully. He had somehow managed to find out my ring size without me knowing, which seemed like another sign that we were meant to be together. The months of wedding planning were stressful but exciting. We made every decision together, from the flowers to the music to the guest list. David was surprisingly involved in the details, which I appreciated because so many of my friends complained about their fiancés being disinterested in the planning process. He had opinions about everything from the color of the napkins to the font on our invitations. Looking back now, I realize he might have been involved for reasons I never suspected at the time. Santorini was David's suggestion for our honeymoon destination. He had been researching Greek islands for months, showing me photos of the white buildings against the blue sea, the stunning sunsets the romantic restaurants perched on cliffsides. The hotel he booked was supposed to be one of the most exclusive on the island, with a private balcony overlooking the caldera and amenities that would make our week feel like pure luxury. He handled all the travel arrangements himself, saying he wanted to surprise me with special touches along the way. The flight to Greece was long, but filled with anticipation. David held my hand during takeoff, joking about how we were literally flying toward our new life together. We watched movies, shared headphones, listening to a playlist he had made of songs that reminded him of our relationship, and talked about all the things we wanted to do during our week in paradise. He seemed more relaxed than I had seen him in months, as if the stress of the wedding planning had finally lifted from his shoulders. When we arrived at the hotel, it was even more beautiful than the photos had promised. Our suite was on the top floor with panoramic views of the Aegean Sea. The staff greeted us with champagne and rose petals scattered across the bed. Everything felt magical, like we were living inside a dream that was too perfect to be real. David tipped the bellhop generously and immediately started taking photos of me against the backdrop of the sunset, saying he wanted to capture every moment of our perfect honeymoon. The first 2 days were exactly what I had imagined our honeymoon would be. We slept late, had leisurely breakfasts on our private terrace, explored the narrow streets of Oya hand in hand, and took hundreds of photos of each other against the iconic blue domed churches. David was attentive and romantic, constantly telling me how happy he was, how perfect our life was going to be together. We had candlelit dinners at restaurants he had researched in advance, each one more romantic than the last. He seemed to know exactly where to go and what to order, as if he had been planning every detail for months. On our second night, we made love with the kind of passion that felt like a celebration of our new marriage. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the sheets, watching the stars through our open balcony doors, David whispered that he had never been happier in his entire life. He traced patterns on my skin with his fingertips and talked about the children we would have, the house we would buy, the adventures we would share over the decades ahead. I fell asleep, feeling completely content, completely secure in the knowledge that I had married my best friend and soulmate. But on the third day, something shifted. It started with small things that I initially dismissed as jet lag or the effects of too much sun and wine. David seemed distracted during breakfast, checking his phone more frequently than usual. When I asked if everything was okay at work, he quickly put the phone away and assured me that nothing could be important enough to interrupt our honeymoon. But I noticed he kept glancing toward the phone even after he had set it aside. That afternoon, while David was in the shower, his phone buzzed with a text message. The screen lit up on the nightstand next to me, and I could see the beginning of the message without even trying to look. It was from someone named Alex, and the preview showed words that made my stomach clench with sudden anxiety. I didn't read the full message, but what I saw was enough to make me realize that something was very wrong with the perfect honeymoon I thought we were sharing. When David emerged from the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist, his hair still dripping wet, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. The message preview was still visible on the lock screen, those few words that had sent ice through my veins, despite the Mediterranean heat flooding our room. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, but there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before. A careful quality, like he was measuring each word before speaking it. I held up his phone without unlocking it. "Alex texted you. Something about confirming the schedule for tomorrow." David's face went through a series of micro expressions so quickly I almost missed them. Surprise, calculation, then forced casualness as he reached for the phone. "Oh, that's just work stuff. I told them I might check in once or twice during the week, remember?" But I didn't remember him saying that. In fact, I specifically remembered him making a big show of setting his out-of-office message and telling his colleagues that he would be completely unreachable for 7 days. He had even joked about how his boss would have to survive without his constant input for once in his career. "I thought you said you were going completely offline," I said, trying to keep my voice light, even though my heart was starting to race. David sat down beside me on the bed, his hand finding my knee in what should have been a reassuring gesture. "I know I said that, but you know how demanding my job can be. Alex is just checking on a few things while I'm gone. Nothing major." The explanation sounded reasonable enough, but something about his body language felt wrong. His shoulders were tense, and he wasn't quite meeting my eyes the way he usually did when we talked. After 4 years together, I knew David's tells better than anyone. The slight tightening around his eyes when he was stretching the truth. The way he would touch his wedding ring when he was nervous. Both of those signs were flashing, like warning lights as he spoke. "What kind of schedule?" I pressed gently. "Just boring financial stuff. Client meetings, quarterly reports. Really, Jess, it's nothing you need to worry about during our honeymoon." He leaned over to kiss my forehead, but even that familiar gesture felt different somehow, more performative than genuine, as if he was trying to convince both of us that everything was normal. The rest of that day passed in a strange haze of forced normalcy. We went to lunch at a seaside taverna, where David ordered for both of us in broken Greek, charming the elderly owner with his attempts at conversation. We spent the afternoon lounging by the infinity pool, David reading a thriller novel, while I pretended to nap behind my sunglasses. But I was actually watching him, studying his behavior for signs of whatever was making my instincts scream that something was terribly wrong. He seemed to be performing the role of perfect honeymoon husband, rather than simply being himself. Every gesture felt slightly exaggerated. Every smile held just a beat too long. When other couples at the pool complimented us on being such a beautiful newlywed pair, David's responses were perfectly charming, but somehow hollow, like an actor who knew his lines, but had forgotten the emotion behind them. That evening, David suggested we skip dinner and order room service instead. He claimed he wanted a quiet night in, just the two of us, but I noticed he chose the wine from the minibar rather than calling down to request a bottle from the restaurant, as if he wanted to avoid any interaction with the hotel staff that might require him to use his name or room number. We ate grilled fish and roasted vegetables on our terrace as the sun set over the caldera, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that should have been impossibly romantic. David kept the conversation light, asking about my childhood memories of family vacations, sharing stories about his college friends that I had heard dozens of times before, safe topics that required no real vulnerability or honesty. After dinner, he suggested we take a bath together in the enormous marble tub that overlooked the sea. The gesture should have felt intimate and romantic, but instead, it felt like another performance. David lit candles around the bathroom and added expensive bath oils that came with the suite, but his movements seemed mechanical rather than passionate. As we soaked in the warm water, David's phone buzzed again from the bedroom. This time, I saw his whole body tense at the sound. He tried to hide his reaction by pulling me closer and kissing my neck, but I could feel the change in his breathing, the way his muscles had gone rigid against my back. "Maybe you should check that," I suggested, "in case It's important. Nothing is more important than this, he murmured against my ear, but I could hear the lie in his voice. We made love that night with a desperation that felt different from our previous passionate encounters. David held me too tightly, as if he was trying to memorize the feeling of my body against his. His whispered endearments felt urgent rather than tender, like he was trying to convince himself, as much as me, that everything between us was still perfect. Afterward, as David fell into what seemed like an exhausted sleep, I lay awake, listening to the sound of waves against the rocks below our balcony. My nursing training had taught me to trust my instincts about people, and every instinct I had was telling me that my husband was hiding something significant from me. I had married a man who claimed to love my intelligence, my perceptiveness, my ability to read situations and people with unusual accuracy. But now, he was lying to me about something, and he was doing it badly enough that I could see right through his deception. The question that kept me awake until dawn was simple but terrifying. If David was willing to lie to me 3 days into our marriage, what else had he been hiding during the 4 years we had been together? The next morning brought new revelations that would make my growing suspicions seem insignificant compared to what I was about to discover. I woke up before David that 4th morning, my body clock still adjusting to the time difference, but my mind racing with questions I couldn't silence. The Mediterranean sun was just beginning to paint our suite in golden light, and David looked peaceful in sleep. His face relaxed in a way that made him seem younger, more like the man I had fallen in love with 4 years ago. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that I was overthinking everything, that the stress of the wedding and the adjustment to married life was making me paranoid about nothing. But then his phone buzzed again on the nightstand, and I watched his eyes snap open immediately, fully alert in a way that suggested he had been expecting the message, even in sleep. He reached for the phone before he even acknowledged that I was awake, his fingers moving quickly across the screen as he read whatever Alex had sent this time. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, but his attention was still on the phone screen, and the greeting felt automatic rather than genuine. "Everything okay?" I asked, propping myself up on one elbow to study his expression. "Perfect," he replied, but he was already typing a response to the message. "Just work stuff. Alex needs some files emailed to a client." I watched him compose his text, noting how his thumbs moved with the kind of speed that suggested he was very familiar with this type of communication. This wasn't the behavior of someone handling occasional work emergencies during his honeymoon. This felt like someone maintaining an ongoing conversation that required careful attention and quick responses. "I thought you said your out-of-office message would handle everything," I said carefully. David finished typing and set the phone face down on his chest, finally giving me his full attention. "You know how clients can be. Some of them panic if they can't reach their advisor immediately, even when they know I'm on vacation. I'm just keeping them calm until I get back." The explanation sounded reasonable, but I had been with David through other vacations, including a 2-week trip to Italy the previous summer. During that entire trip, he had checked his work email maybe 3 times total, and never with the kind of urgency I was seeing now. Something fundamental had changed about his relationship with his job, or his need to stay connected was about something else entirely. We ordered breakfast to be delivered to our room, and while we waited, David suggested we spend the day exploring some of the smaller villages on the island. He pulled out a guidebook that looked well-worn, with pages marked and notes written in the margins. When I commented on how prepared he was, he laughed and said he had been researching Santorini for months wanting to make sure we saw all the most romantic spots. But as I looked more closely at the guidebook, I noticed that some of the markings didn't seem to be about tourist attractions at all. There were addresses written in David's handwriting, phone numbers, and what looked like appointment times scattered throughout the pages. When I asked about one of the addresses, David quickly closed the book and said it was probably just a restaurant recommendation he had copied down from a travel blog. During breakfast on our terrace, David's phone buzzed 4 more times. Each time, he would glance at the screen with an expression of concentration that seemed out of place during what was supposed to be a relaxed honeymoon morning. The 4th time, he excused himself to take a call, stepping inside our suite and closing the balcony door behind him. I could see him through the glass, pacing back and forth as he spoke in what appeared to be hushed, urgent tones. His body language was tense, almost agitated, and at one point he ran his hand through his hair in the gesture he always made when he was stressed or frustrated about something. The call lasted nearly 15 minutes, and when he rejoined me on the terrace, he looked drained. "Sorry about that," he said, settling back into his chair. "Crisis at the office. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was, because this wasn't how David had ever handled work stress before. In 4 years together, I had seen him manage difficult clients, demanding deadlines, and complicated financial situations with a calm professionalism that never seemed to follow him home. The man sitting across from me now seemed rattled in a way that felt completely foreign to the David I thought I knew. "Maybe we should head home early if work is this demanding," I suggested, watching his reaction carefully. "No," he said quickly, almost sharply. No, that's not necessary. Everything will be fine. I just need to handle a few things today, and then I can fully disconnect for the rest of the week." The phrase, "handle a few things," sent another chill through me. It sounded ominous in a way that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or client meetings. Combined with his increasing nervousness in the strange addresses in his guidebook, I was beginning to suspect that David's mysterious communications had nothing to do with his job as a financial consultant. After breakfast, David announced that he needed to run a quick errand in town while I relaxed by the pool. He claimed he wanted to pick up some souvenirs for his parents, but when I offered to come with him, he insisted that I should enjoy the hotel amenities and that he would be back within a couple of hours. "Besides," he said, kissing my forehead in that performative way that was becoming disturbingly familiar, "you've been looking a little tired. Some pool time and maybe a spa treatment would be good for you." The suggestion felt condescending, as if he was trying to manage my schedule to keep me occupied and out of his way. David had never treated me like someone who needed to be managed or distracted before. Throughout our relationship, he had valued my opinions, included me in decisions, and treated me as an equal partner in everything we did together. As I watched him gather his things to leave, I noticed he was taking more than just his wallet and phone. He packed a small leather portfolio that I had seen him use for important business meetings, along with what looked like several printed documents that he folded carefully and slipped into his jacket pocket. "What's all the paperwork for?" I asked casually. "Just some contracts I need to review," he replied without meeting my eyes. I figured I could multitask while I'm shopping. After he left, I sat by the pool trying to read a novel I had been looking forward to, but I couldn't concentrate on the story. Every few pages, I would catch myself staring at the hotel entrance, wondering what David was really doing in town and why he felt the need to lie to me about it. Around noon, I decided to order lunch by the pool and struck up a conversation with Maria, one of the hotel staff members, who had been particularly friendly. since our arrival. She spoke excellent English and seemed genuinely interested in making sure all the guests had a perfect experience. "Your husband is very thoughtful," she commented as she brought my Greek salad. "He arranged for champagne and flowers to be delivered to your room every day this week. Most men don't think of details like that." I smiled and thanked her, but her comment struck me as odd. David hadn't mentioned arranging for daily deliveries, and I had assumed the champagne and flowers were standard honeymoon amenities provided by the hotel. The fact that he had specifically arranged for them suggested a level of advanced planning that went beyond simply booking a romantic getaway. "He must have contacted you weeks ago to set all that up," I said, fishing for more information. "Oh, yes," Maria nodded. "He called several times in the past month to confirm arrangements. Very detailed man, your husband. He wanted to make sure everything would be perfect for your stay." Several times. David had called this hotel several times in the past month, but he had never mentioned these conversations to me. In fact, when I had asked about the hotel arrangements, he had made it sound like a simple online booking with maybe one confirmation call. "Did he ask about any other services?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Like restaurant reservations or tour bookings?" "He was very interested in our concierge services," Maria replied. "Asked many questions about local contacts, transportation arrangements, that sort of thing. He seemed to know quite a bit about the island already." After Maria left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting a glimpse into preparations for this trip that David had kept completely hidden from me. The David I knew was certainly capable of planning romantic surprises, but the level of secrecy and advanced coordination Maria was describing felt excessive, almost suspicious. I spent the afternoon by the pool, but every time I tried to relax, my mind would circle back to the same troubling questions. Why was David being so secretive about his communications? What kind of errand required a leather portfolio and printed contracts? And why did I feel like I was being managed and kept occupied rather than included in whatever was really happening during our honeymoon? When David returned to the hotel that evening, he seemed both relieved and exhausted. He had a small bag of tourist trinkets that looked hastily purchased, as if shopping had been an afterthought rather than the main purpose of his trip to town. "How was your day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me on our terrace. "Relaxing," I replied, studying his face for signs of what he had really been doing. "How were the souvenir shops?" "Fine. Typical tourist stuff. But I found some nice things for our families." He showed me a few items from the bag, ceramic replicas of the blue-domed churches, some local olive oil, postcards featuring sunset views of the caldera. Everything looked like it had been purchased quickly from the same shop, without much thought or care. "What about your contracts?" I asked. "Did you get your work stuff sorted out?" For just a moment, David looked confused, as if he had forgotten the story he had told me that morning. Then his expression cleared, and he nodded. "All handled. Everything shook as he said it." His phone buzzed again with "Be much quieter" for the rest of our trip. But even another message from Alex. This time, David didn't even glance at the screen, which struck me as more suspicious than if he had checked it immediately. He was trying too hard to appear disconnected from whatever communication was demanding his attention. That night, as we prepared for bed, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. I was going to find out what David was hiding from me, even if it meant violating his privacy in ways that went against everything I believed about trust in a marriage. When David fell asleep, I was going to look at his phone. The decision to breach David's privacy felt like crossing a line I never thought I would cross. But lying next to him in our honeymoon suite, while he hid something significant from me, felt like an even bigger betrayal. I waited until his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm that meant he was truly asleep, then carefully slipped out of bed and retrieved his phone from the nightstand. My hands were trembling as I tried to unlock it, hoping he hadn't changed his passcode since our wedding. The familiar 4 digits that spelled out part of the date we first met still worked, and suddenly I was staring at a screen full of messages that made my blood run cold. The conversation thread with Alex wasn't about work at all. Alex wasn't even a colleague from David's financial firm. The messages revealed a coordination of activities that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or client emergencies. Instead, I found detailed discussions about timing, locations, and what appeared to be payments for services I couldn't immediately identify. One message from earlier that day read, "Everything confirmed for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Same location as discussed. Payment transferred as agreed." David's response, "Perfect. Make sure the arrangements are exactly as we planned. Can't afford any mistakes now." I scrolled through days of similar exchanges, each one revealing more of a puzzle I didn't understand, but knew I needed to solve. There were references to meetings, confirmations of details, and discussions about maintaining secrecy that made it clear David had been orchestrating something elaborate during our entire honeymoon. But it was the photos who I had married, mixed in with the romantic in his camera roll, that truly shattered my understanding of take. Pictures of buildings in the town below, specific shots of our first few days, were images I had never seen him addresses, and what looked like surveillance photos of people I didn't recognize. One photo showed a woman with dark hair entering what appeared to be a local business. Another captured a man in a suit walking along the waterfront. These weren't tourist photos or random snapshots. They looked purposeful, deliberate, like I tried to process what I was seeing without jumping documentation of some kind. My nursing training kicked in as to conclusions, but every rational explanation I could think of crumbled under the weight of the evidence accumulating on David's phone. This wasn't work stress or surprise planning for romantic gestures. This was something else entirely. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a folder of documents in his email that he had clearly been referencing during his mysterious trip to town. Legal papers, financial agreements, and what appeared to be contracts written in both English and Greek. My limited understanding of legal language wasn't enough to decipher their full meaning, but I could see David's name on several documents alongside signatures I didn't recognize. One document appeared to be some kind of property agreement. Another looked like a business partnership contract. All of them were dated within the past month, meaning David had been negotiating and signing legal agreements in Greece, while simultaneously planning our wedding and honeymoon. As I sat on the bathroom floor with his phone, scrolling through evidence of a secret life I knew nothing about, I felt like I was looking at the belongings of a stranger. The man sleeping in our honeymoon suite wasn't the David I thought I had married. He was someone who had been living a double life with a skill that suggested this wasn't his first experience with elaborate deception. Sometimes the person you trust most in the world is the one hiding the biggest secrets. My perfect honeymoon became a nightmare the moment I realized I was sharing a bed with a complete stranger. The David I married was a carefully constructed lie, and our romantic getaway was just another stage for his deception. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, because love shouldn't require you to question your sanity. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And subscribe for more real stories that reveal the truth behind perfect facades.